Whatever Happened to Janie? Chapter 1. After their sister's kidnapping, Dad not only took Stephen and Jody to school every morning, he held their hands. Not once in 180 days a year, kindergarten through 6th grade, were the remaining spring children allowed to take a school bus. Not once had Jody been allowed to walk in or out of the elementary school without her father there. The children would get out of the car. Dad would take Jody's hand in his right hand and Stephen's in his left. Then they would walk across the parking lot into the building and down to Jody's classroom, where he would transfer Jody's hand to the teachers. His eyes would scan the halls as if kidnappers were lurking beside the winning poster from the science contest. When Jody was safely in her teacher's care, Dad would continue on with Stephen. For years, Jody thought this pattern was normal. But when Stephen was in 4th grade, he said if anybody ever held his hand again, he would bite it. He said if anybody had planned to kidnap another spring child, they had given up by now. Stephen said he would carry a knife, he would carry a submachine gun, he would carry a nuclear bomb, and he would blow away all would-be kidnappers. But never again would he let anybody hold his hand. From his 4th grade heart had come the hidden rage that all felt and never dared say out loud. I hate Jenny. Stephen had screamed. I hate my sister for ruining our lives. The least Jeannie could have done was leave her body there for us to find. Then we could bury her and be done with her. I hate it when we have to worry every single day. I hate her. Stephen was 17 now. Jody could remember the meal as if it were yesterday. Mom and Dad had sat as tight and silent as wound-up dolls. More vividly than anything else, Jody remembered that nobody yelled at Stephen for saying such terrible things. Years of worry had torn the family's guts apart, like a tornado peeling the house walls away. Worry had separated them from each other, so they were not 6 people knit close in tight, warm threads of family, but travelers accidentally in the same motel. There had been a long, long silence after Stephen's outburst. Even the twins, who had been thick and annoying all their paired lives, knew better than to speak. At last, Dad had extended his hands from his sides, straight out, like a Roman slave being crucified. The whole family held hands every evening to say grace before supper. That was what Dad intended, and yet the stiffness of his arms, the awful lines around his mouth, did not look like grace. Jody had been scared because she was between Dad and Stephen, and she would have to take Stephen's hand, and she was pretty sure Stephen really would bite her, but he didn't. He cried instead. Stephen had cried easily when he was little, and the humiliation that had left its mark. Nothing would have made Stephen Spring cry now that he was 17. Where a 10-year-old had exhibited tears, the young man used fist. So they held hands, and Dad had prayed, not grace. He didn't mention food. He didn't mention shelter. He said, Dear Lord, tonight we are going to bury Jenny. We love her, but she's gone, and now we're going to say goodbye. Thank you for the time we had, Jenny. The rest of us have to go on living. Thank you for making Stephen tell us. Jody was only 9, only a 3rd grader. Jody had needed to take her hands back from Stephen and Daddy so she could wipe away her tears. And Jody had never admitted to anybody that they were not tears of grief for her missing sister, but tears of relief that they were going to put Jenny on the shelf and be done with her. Give Jenny a guardian angel, said Dad softly to the Lord. Usually during grace, Jody felt that Dad was talking to his children, ordering them to behave and be thankful. Not this prayer. Dad was talking to the Lord. Jody thought if she looked up, she would see God, and that was even scarier than having to hold Stephen's hand, so she didn't look up. Take care of Jenny, Lord, wherever she is. Help us not mention Jenny again. Help us be a family of 6 and forget that we were ever a family of 7. Dad squeezed Jody's hand. Jody squeezed Stephen's. The squeeze went around the circle, and the Lord must have been there because the lump in Jody's throat dissolved, and the twins began to talk about sports. Even though they were babies, they talked about sports. They had been playing with basketballs and footballs and tennis balls from birth, and Stephen showed his B-plus geography paper. He had gotten 42 of the 50 state capitals right. The family sealed up like a perfect package. Things fit again. Everything from the number of chairs around the table to the toppling stacks of presents under the Christmas tree. The Spring family had 6 people in it now. The 7th was gone. Mom and Dad didn't even telephone Mr. Mollison again. Mr. Mollison was the FBI agent who had been in charge of the case. For a while, he had been as much a part of the family as Uncle Paul and Aunt Llewellyn. The next year, nobody talked about Jenny on her birthday. Nobody sobbed on the anniversary of the day Jenny went missing. Mr. and Mrs. Spring were still more careful than other parents in the state of New Jersey, but the children were more careful too. It was not because Jody and her brothers were worried that they might be kidnapped too. They were worried that the parents would be worried. The Spring children were always lined up at telephones to let Mom or Dad know where they were. They were never late. They were children who knew, too well, one of the horrors of the world. The thing Jody could not get over, now that her sister Jenny turned out to be alive and coming home, was that there had never been a horror. They had imagined all of it. Jenny had not died. She had not been tortured. She had not been cold or lost or drowned or raped or even frightened. Jenny had been fine, just fine all along. It was incredible when Jody thought of the lancing fear the rest of them had endured for 11.5 years. In most ways, of course, worry and fear had vanished. When she was small, it vanished because Jody believed in Daddy's deal with God. If Daddy and the Lord both said stop worrying, well, then who was Jody to worry? But as Jody moved into her teens, the reality of her sister's kidnapping only surfaced. When she brought a library book home, and the heroine was a redhead named Jenny, when Stephen had his first date, and her name was Jenny, when the late movie on the television was about kidnapping, when Jody went in the post office and saw those black and white photos, have you seen this child? She felt it again. The panic like burning acid, making it impossible to think of anything else, and the rage, the terrible, terrible anger that their lives had been so brutally interfered with. Brian and Brendan were babies when it happened, still sitting in the double stroller, getting everything sticky. Jody's relationship with her twin brothers began by steering around them lest they smear her with melting lollipop and contaminate her with Oreo cookie crumbs. Somehow it had continued that way. Keeping clear was Jody's major activity with her little brothers. But Jody had been in kindergarten and Stephen in first grade, old enough to have memories, old enough to understand what had happened. Well, no, not quite. Nobody had ever known what happened that day at the shopping mall. Nobody had ever known where Jenny was taken, or who took her, or for what purpose. But all too well, Jody understood what happened to her family because of it. It was so confusing and astonishing to find that all along Jenny had been happy and healthy and warm, and everything else was good. The Springs had never needed to worry. Mom and Dad were weak with relief and joy. Jody mentally laid her history of nightmares out on the bed, like laundry to be put away, and studied them, understanding less than ever. Stephen, of course, was angry. Stephen didn't even have a fuse. He just continually exploded. Stephen yelled that Jenny ought to have suffered since the rest of them had. Don't talk like that once she comes, warned their father. Dad was wildly excited. He and Mom kept bursting into shouts of laughter and hugging each other and hyperventilating. That was Jody's new word, hyperventilate. Jody did not want her family getting over emotional or too noisy. She felt it was time to drop the hand holding at dinner and the saying of grace. Jenny would think they were weird. Don't hyperventilate, Jody begged constantly, but her family was the hyperventilating kind. When Mom thought nobody was watching, she would rearrange the dining table, seeing where the seventh chair fit the best, the chair her missing daughter would sit in when she came home. Then Mom would do a little tap dance around the chair, fingertips on the wood. She looked so comic. A 43-year-old, getting heavy, going gray, wearing sneakers that squeaked on the linoleum instead of tapping. We all have to work hard, Mom warned every night. Jenny's grown up with another family, different values, I suppose. This won't be easy. Mom burst into laughter, not believing a word of it. This was her baby girl. It would be easy and joyful. We may have a hard time adjusting, she said. This was for Stephen's benefit. Stephen was not a great adjuster. Jody planned to be the buffer between Jenny and Stephen. Jody knew that she would not have problems. This was the sister with the matching J name. They would be like twins. Brian and Brendan noticed much of anything, never noticed much of anything, except each other and their own lives. Jody thought it was such a great way to live, wrapped up and enclosed with the secret best friend who with you everywhere and was part of you. That was how she would be with Jenny. At night, when they were each in their own beds, with only a thin table and a narrow white telephone to separate them, they would tell each other sister things. Jenny would tell Jody details about the kidnapping that she never told anybody, and Jody would share the secret of her life, aches and hurts and loves and delights she had never managed to confess to Nicole or Caitlin. Jody was cleaning her bedroom as if it never had been cleaned before. Nicole and Caitlin said it was impossible to share a room this small. Two beds had been squeezed in, one table bureau and one medium desk. Another person could never fit in her share of sweaters, earrings, cassettes, and shoes. Jody seized with a frenzy of energy, folding and refolding her clothing until it took up only half of the space it used to, discarding left and right, putting paper grocery bags stuffed with little used items in the attic. She had spent her allowance on scented drawer liner paper from Laura Ashley. It was lovely, delicate English-looking pattern. Its soft perfume filled the room like a stranger. Jenny would be pleased. Mom loved matching names. Jody and Jenny went together. Of course, the twins, Brian and Brendan, went together. Stephen was the oldest, and Mom and Dad had always meant to have a sixth child who would be named Stacy, whether it was a boy or a girl. So there had been Jody and Jenny, Stephen and Stacy, Brian and Brendan. Of course, after Jenny went missing, nobody would consider another baby. How could any of them ever have left the room again? Nobody could have focused their eyes anywhere else again. They'd all have had heart attacks and died from fear that somebody would take that baby too. Jenny was only 20 months younger than Jody. As toddlers, they had fought, Jody pairing up with Stephen. Over the years, Jody had thought of this a lot. If Jody, had been holding Jenny's hand at the shopping mall the way she was supposed to, nobody would have kidnapped Jenny. When she got to know this new sister, she would have to say, should she say she's sorry? Admit that it was her fault? If the new sister said, "Don't worry, everything's fine now. I'm home and happy," Jody would be safe telling about her guilt. But if the new sister said, "I hate you for it. I've always hated you for it," what then? Jody put the hand mirror that said Jenny down on a piece of lace she had chosen to decorate the top of the bureau. Jody's mother loved things with names on them. The four kids had mugs, sweatshirts, bracelets, book bags, writing paper, everything with their names printed or embroidered or engraved. Mom wanted to have a house full of Jenny items for the homecoming. It was a popular name. They had no trouble at the mall finding tons of stuff that said Jenny. They bought so much they were embarrassed. "We'll have to bring it out one piece at a time," said Jody, giggling. "She'll know we love her," said Jody's mother. But behind the hyperventilating and the laughter lay the years of worry. Mom was trembling. She had been trembling for days. She was actually losing weight from shivering. You could see her hands shake. Nobody had commented on it because everybody else had shivers too. Everybody was worried about everything. What to serve for dinner on the first night, what to say to the neighbors, how to take Jenny to school, how to hug. Would she be afraid? Would she be funny? Would she be shy? What would she be like? the sister who had grown up somewhere else. Jody opened the bureau drawers and looked at the empty shelves. She was proud of herself opening up her life, just like a drawer, to take Jenny in. I have a sister again, thought Jody Spring. She isn't buried. She isn't gone. She wasn't hurt. Her guardian angel did take care of her, and now he's bringing her back to us. Tomorrow.